Welcome to Tales from the Drive-In. Grab some popcorn and tune in as we discuss the wondrous curiosities of the world on and off the screen. I'm your host, BJ Segura. I'm a filmmaker, paranormal enthusiast, and horror fanatic. Joining me is Ava De Vera, a professional model who uses her love and experience with all things creepy and paranormal in her artistic expressions. Today we will talk about costumes, vampires, past lives, dreams, and the horror community. Come join our ADD paranormal conversation. It's going to get random. Welcome.
Thank
How are
you.
you doing today?
I am doing great. Just got back from Denver and saw you in person. And
Yes.
so, yeah, how are you?
Good. It was
Good.
fun seeing you again. It's funny, like I've only seen you like in person in 40s clothes,
You know
which
what?
is pretty
That's
awesome,
true. That's funny.
right?
And I think those events are actually a lot more fun the more people you know. And so hopefully as the years go by, we can pick up more friends, more like-minded people and have a group.
Oh yeah. And the Boulder one is the one that like most of my friends and family will go to, just because it's more spread out. There's a lot more to do,
It's
there's
a little bit
food
more
trucks and
casual.
stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, there's planes flying
Yeah.
by and you can yeah, so but that's cool. Like obviously you're really big into dressing up. You do obviously an amazing job, like all the stuff
Thank
that you
you.
wear. Yeah, and all the stuff you have on Instagram, it's amazing. Just
Well,
all the
thanks.
the costumes you have and all the cool things that you get to go to. Like I
Well,
see you.
it's my artistic outlet. I mean, I try to do at least one or two events a year, and this year it was just back to back every single weekend from October until after the new year. So I might have overextended it a little bit, but I had a lot of fun doing it. So I think it was worth it in the end. And that's kind of what I do on the weekends is I'll just delve into my art project, which is this year's costume. And so that's why it's more this year I'm wearing this and I'm probably going to trash it or stick it up in my attic and then do something different next year just so it's different. You know, some people are not like that, like especially with the Renaissance Festival, they get a really good quality piece out of leather and they just add to it year after year. And with me, I totally respect that. But for me, I just have to change it up. I get so bored and I want to do something different, and different weekends down here have different themes. And so that's kind of where my mind is at with that one.
Yeah, and I mean, you've done the Ren Fest, you've done the 40s ball, you've done wasn't there a vampire thing that you went to as well?
Yeah, there is a endless night vampire ball that's actually international now. They have them in major cities in the United States. I believe Vegas, Los Angeles, Salem is a huge one. New York. I think they have them in Dallas as well. But of course, New Orleans. I mean, Salem and New Orleans seemed like the best places for something like that. And so I've gone to the New Orleans ball a few times in the past, and every year they have their own theme as well. So of course that kind of changes what you wear, unless you just want to be, you know, consistent every year and maybe do something Victorian, because you do see a lot of that as well. The costumes are absolutely amazing. The people, a lot of them actually do special effects makeup professionally. And so it's just really awesome to see all the work that they put in it and also what they can wear all night prosthetics wise and everything. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. That's actually a good transition, like question wise, as far as like obviously you're big into horror as well, right? And all the things. Obviously costumes at that festival, or the not festival, I guess is a ball, right?
Mhm.
Um, were there people dressed Victorian vampire stuff?
So this past year, it was goddess, something goddess was the theme. And so, in years past, they've done circus, they've done Victorian. And this is actually one of the first years that I really caught a couple of film throwbacks. So there was two women there dressed up like Interview with a Vampire. And that was pretty cool. It's the Victorian dresses, one's green, one's blue. And then I saw a Nosferatu, so that was pretty cool.
Nice.
And I know they did effects makeup professionally and everything. And so the other one that I saw, they looked like the muses from the Dracula movie with Keanu Reeves. So there was quite a few, and they did excellent jobs. I was super impressed. I just cannot believe that you can wear silicone for that long, and it was hours long, and so it's almost like filming a movie because you're in there, you're sweating, and you're in character and all that stuff. So.
Yeah, yeah, I've definitely done my fair share of that stuff, but more like horror fests or like Comic-Con, that kind of thing. But like
That's
for it to
cool.
be a specific vampire thing, that would be super fun.
Mhm.
Because I mean, I don't know, vampires are probably one of the biggest creatures or whatever you want to call them, supernatural entity, whatever you want to call them, around, right? Like I think that the popularity for vampires is just, it's always going to be there. Like it may slow down here and there, but
Yeah.
then a TV show or another movie comes out and you know
Well,
just brings it back.
they've been so romanticized over the years, and there's a lot of dark love stories that you can play with that whole genre, and I think that just in general people will always flock to something like that.
Hmm.
And of course there's true folklore. Like I know I have a few friends from Eastern Europe, and you see that in Serbia and places like that, like the original vampire lore and all of those things. And then, of course, romanticized in the Victorian era. And it's just kind of interesting to see that timeline and how timeless they are, I guess, especially since they live forever, and you just the juxtaposition between that gothic love story, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it just really pulls people in.
Yeah, it's so cool, it's so fun, and I love talking about vampires because it is this, what's cool about them is not, again, there's the romanticized side of it, but there's also just the living forever side of it,
Hmm.
just being able to go to, live in these different generations. And a lot of TV shows and films play with that and have fun with
Hmm.
it, like What We Do in the Shadows,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
um oh, that's such a funny show and movie,
Yeah.
right? Like it's like these roommates that are from different time periods and they're trying to get along with each other. They're all vampires, but they're all different kind of vampires from different
Right.
times. And
Don't you think it would get
yeah.
kind of boring though, living forever? I mean, after a while, you're seeing all of your friends and close family members pass away. You make new ones. It keeps happening. I mean, I can definitely see how that would get just kind of sad.
Unless you like turn them like
True.
right, unless your family is a vampire family,
Then
like,
they
but
can
you're
annoy you
right.
forever.
Right, and then like you'd really get sick of them, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe that's maybe that's not such a good thing, right?
Right, right.
I don't know.
But
um
speaking of New Orleans, my mom is actually from New Orleans. And so I've just always kind of had a love affair with that city. There is just something different about that city that you can't hardly find anywhere else, throughout the world. It's got an interesting history, interesting background. Of course, they have their fair share of vampire lore as well. And it's just something that's always kind of hit that part of me that has that love for things that are different, and that's definitely a different city.
no, I love New Orleans. I've only been there one time, but I had such a good time there. I went, it was for a reunion for a study abroad program that I went on years ago.
Oh,
But
nice.
yeah, it was just, God, it was just like, I get what you mean. It's the vibe. It's because we were there. It was after Mardi Gras, so I mean, it had slowed down, but not much. Like it was
No,
still.
yeah.
It's a very lively city. The
Mhm.
the music, people playing their brass instruments on the streets,
Mhm. Some of the
all
best
over.
musicians you'll ever hear, like even
Yeah.
compared to those who are professional and famous. I mean, the talent there is amazing. The history, just the food, everything. It's such a mixing mixed pot of just different culture, which I love, and you can't ever get bored there. There's literally something going on every weekend. There's a Creole tomato festival. There's always something that you can
It's
get
probably a
into.
beignet festival of some
Yeah,
sort, I'm sure.
probably. Yeah, for sure.
One thing about New Orleans, it's so funny because that you bring that city up because I literally just had a podcast 2 days ago where interviewed a paranormal investigator who his most recent episode was in New Orleans.
Mm.
And yeah, I'm sure obviously there's a lot of paranormal activity there, just because of like all the things that have happened there. It's got a
Oh, for sure.
rich history and an ugly history
Hmm.
in some respects. And
Hmm.
that's always fascinated me. Like I've always wanted to go there in a not a vacation aspect, but more of a, study the paranormal stuff out there and see what's there, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I try to do. I do like to travel. That's probably my number one pastime besides, dressing up and going to different events. But in every city you go to, there's history there. And I always love to take the history tours. And, this day and age, you can find a ghost tour in nearly any city that you travel to. There was actually a TV show recently I was watching on Netflix. I think it was called Dark Travel or something of to that effect. And this guy just goes around the world and goes to different festivals and places and kind of shows their culture and what they do. And I think he was in Cambodia or Thailand, something like that. And they'll literally like take out their ancestors from being buried and kind of just hang out with them and then just put them back up, and it's like, oh, there's Aunt Martha. She's been dead for 15 years. And that's normal over there. And, in a Hispanic culture, it's very normal to think of your loved ones, Day of the Dead,
Hmm.
and stuff like that. And so for some cultures, it's not really as creepy as it is almost like a respect thing.
Yeah, the because yeah, you're remembering the people from your past, your
Hmm.
ancestors, and that's a big thing. I don't know if I've told you about my dream where I died.
I don't
Did we
think
get
so.
into that at all? Okay, so I've been telling everybody just because it's such a crazy dream. So I had it on the Day of the Dead. It was one of the days, right? So the first, I think it's like over a 2 day period, and I had it on that first day. Basically, I woke up or I was in the dream where it was kind of like the Walking Dead world,
Oh, wow.
and I actually ran into it was so stupid. I actually did see like Rick Grimes, which was weird. I'm like, this is, but it wasn't like I don't know. It was a apocalyptic world, and I was searching for somebody, and then we ended up finding them. But for some reason, I had to sacrifice myself, which was fine. And what happened was I was laying down, and this indigenous group came up to me, and I couldn't tell you. I mean, maybe they were Aztecs. I'm not sure, but basically they were putting like ceramic plates over me
Okay.
that had different symbols on them, and then I fell into this warm, like falling asleep, but like dying, but it felt right. It felt almost like a going home. I wasn't scared, is what it
Hmm.
was. And then I woke up, and I was still in the dream. I was climbing a cliffside, and then I was reaching up to the top, and then of all people, Muhammad Ali reaches out and grabs my hand and pulls me up to
Okay.
all of these people and this light and this overwhelming feeling of love and acceptance. And it wasn't a mental state that I was in, it was a spiritual slash love feeling that I just got overwhelmed with, and it was crazy. And when I was there, they said, okay, like they had a message for me. They said, be kind and spread that, and if other people don't know how, teach them, which I
Mm.
thought was kind of crazy and kind of weird. I was like, all right, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm an all right guy, but I don't think I'm like super kind. But like, yeah, let's do that. Like everybody's kind of a jerk sometimes, but yeah. And then basically I fell back into my body into um the Rick Grimes, the Walking Dead world.
Yeah.
And I woke up from there, and I was alive again. And for some reason I just ran into a bathroom, and then I woke up in my real body. But it took me a good minute to realize who I was, where I was. like the space I was in. Like it was crazy. I've never felt that way before, where I had to figure out like my state of being
Mhm.
again
Yeah.
so yeah, so it was like that out of body experience, and it felt very much. And I talked to some friends about it and some other paranormal people, and they were like, yeah, that was like your ancestors. That's like
I was
going through the
just gonna
whole Day of the
say
Dead.
that. Yes, because I can tell that that dream was emotional for you, like, especially when something like that stands out. And when we have dreams like that that stand out to us with messages like that, we need to pay attention. And especially the time of year and everything, and, just cultural wise, it sounds to me like you definitely were getting some maybe ancestors kind of reaching out, from a long time ago to you to just kind of help you on your path. And I've always been super interested in dream work, astral travel, dream interpretation, things of that nature, and not to mention the times I've had issues with sleep paralysis, which is terrifying. So, have you ever had an experience with sleep paralysis yourself?
Oh yeah, many times. Not recently, good, like, which is great, but like, yeah, I would have it probably a few times a year. But I don't think I've had it for maybe like 5 years now.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's more, I mean, yeah, like I'd like to hear about yours.
So, gosh, okay. So, ever since I was a little kid, I always had just strange things happen to me. And it seems like they've always surrounded my dreams or going to bed, being in that different state of mind where you're kind of in between dimensions, if you believe in that. And your brain is obviously in a different state. And so, a lot of logical people, they're like, well, obviously, it's in a different state. You're going to get different things. That's what you're supposed to do. You dream, it's nothing weird. And then, of course, people who are maybe more sensitive or more into this kind of thing are like, no, it takes you into a different dimension and you're exposed to different creatures. And, so there's a lot of different schools of thought about what it is we see when we're on that plane. And then, of course, movies like Insidious and stuff like that have kind of touched on that theory. But I just remember being a kid and my grandparents, I lived at their house for a little bit with my mom, and my grandmother's brother was over. And I remember this so vividly. And I must have been probably about 4. And it seems like a lot of the stuff that happened that I remember vividly was around these ages, 3, 4, 5, young. But they told me to go to bed, and of course I didn't want to. And I just remember floating up into my eye level with my ceiling fan. And I was like, ooh, I don't want to get hurt. So I kind of moved around that, and I peeked around the corner and I heard them talking about how big I had gotten and how I had lost a tooth. And then I went back into my body. And
Hmm.
so I don't know what to make of it. I don't know if it was an astral travel. I don't know if it was something like my spirit was, I don't know. But I just remember feeling like it's something that I shouldn't tell everybody about, like even at that age. Like it was something that was kind of um maybe people would think I was strange or wouldn't believe me or something like that. And so when I got a little bit older in that same house, I remember I was always in that back room that was my room. And I woke up one night. I had just bought a fountain, and the fountain was like, like one of those plug-in water fountains that's for relaxation.
Yeah.
And it had like a whole bunch of different light settings. And I'm not sure if it was the light setting that messed with my dreams, because when you close your eyes, you can still see lights moving through your eyelids. And I don't know if
Mm.
it maybe did something to me in my dream state, but I woke up, I was on my back, I could not talk, and there was a dark figure next to my bed, and he was shaking his head so rapidly, like, no, just back and forth. And a terror, pure terror, like came over me. And you can't move, you can't speak. And I'm like kind of looking at him with my eyes. And then I kind of boom right back into my body. And I'm just, that feeling. And you're just like looking around, kind of like, is it still here? And there's nothing there. And I immediately turn off my fountain thinking that might have done something to it. But that started at that moment a whole string of just that happening to me for a while, and I don't know why. A little bit later after that happened, I was with my, at the time, boyfriend. We were in his bedroom about to go to sleep, and all of a sudden we both felt and we weren't even asleep, and we were both awake. We had been talking, we were staying up late talking in bed, and we felt this awful, awful demonic presence coming from his hallway. And we both felt it at the same time. And he goes, "What is that?" And I said, "I don't know." Like, all the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I had goosebumps all over my arms. We'd never felt that before. And I'm like, what in the world is going on with all of this weird demonic feeling stuff? And now it's not even when I'm dreaming. And so immediately we just start singing church songs. That's all we knew to do, because at the time I was religious, and that's all we knew to do. And same
Mm.
thing again, fast forward, I remember being asleep and I wake up and I see some dark figure, and it's like kind of in my closet. I'm looking over at it and I immediately try to start reciting the Lord's Prayer, but my tongue is tied and I can't do it. So I just
Mm.
remember those instances of just that. And it's the classic story of, sleep paralysis. That's what you hear. You hear the dark figure, you hear something was on my
Mhm.
chest, stuff like that. So I mean, this is not a new phenomenon. There's been art, drawn about it. People have talked about it since history recorded it. But it's just, oh man, it's horrible.
That
So
sounds, yeah, that's horrible. It is scary, especially when it's both, when it's when you're in sleep paralysis and also awake, when you feel that kind of presence there.
mhm.
Yeah, I don't know, like some people say that that it maybe it's in your head as far as that figure goes, maybe it's something real. I've had that too, where a figure would appear over me, and it's usually like a kid that's like almost like goopy looking, which is weird, like a
Ooh.
3D ultrasound, but like yeah, like very, that's the only thing I can really compare it to. And I've had dark figures like kind of walking by,
Mhm.
like where but I'm not able to see their face or anything. It's just like their torso, and their legs. But yeah, it's a strange thing, and the light thing I think is very interesting because they say that like lucid dreamers, you can do that. Like a way to trigger it is light therapy, like using lights, having like a light mask
Mhm.
and having it turn on to when you're asleep to trigger that. Um, which lucid dreaming is also pretty crazy. I don't
Yeah.
know. Have you done that?
So, lucid dreaming is basically when you can kind of control you know,
Hmm.
yeah. And I've done it inadvertently. For me, it's almost like my dreams take over me. It's almost like I don't have control even when I want to. And I think a lot of that has to do with my dreams have always been there as symbols to help me in my waking life. I've had prophetic dreams before. My I don't know if it comes from the Irish side of my family, maybe the native side of my family way back, but it just seems like things have always helped me that way. Um and so it's almost like even though I try to control it, they're like, "No, we're not doing that right now. You're going to see this symbol and it means this and you're going to pay attention." That's how I feel.
Right.
So when it's
What
happened, it's been on accident.
what kind of prophetic stuff? Because my mother and my brother and me also have that.
Okay.
I'm curious what yours has been like.
So generally, it comes through with animals, and the animals are
Hmm.
symbolic of something. Any time in the past where I've had a snake dream, I'm always like, "Here we go again. Here we go again." It's always like, I know it's going to happen. It's like going to probably be a big change. There's a snake in my life that I can't trust. Something of that nature.
Hmm.
Specifically, the one that really was wild is, I was ending a 14-year marriage, and I had a dream that there was a snake, and it was very specific, and it had a red and gold mark on its back in the dream. And sometimes there's no words, it's just an intuition that you feel when you see it.
Hmm.
I walked into a person's house, and right in their foyer was that exact snake from my dream. It was their kid's toy. And I was like,
Oh.
"Ah, it's you. It's you who, I get it. I know it now. Everything's getting put together now." It's very difficult to tell people that kind of thing because I think especially in the realm of spirituality this day and age. You can go on Facebook, you can find a spiritual page for nearly everything. You can go on TikTok, you can hear people talk. And oftentimes, I think there are very narcissistic people that take advantage of people who are trying to be spiritual or lead a certain type of path. And then there's also people who truly do struggle with mental health issues, schizophrenia, and things of that nature. And so I think it can be difficult to differentiate between, are you getting something spiritual, or hey, maybe schizophrenics have a key to something that we don't see, or I don't know all the answers. That's just theories that I've heard, experienced, thought about. And I think that that's why it's sometimes difficult to talk about stuff like that, because someone might think, well, you might need to be medicated for that. So,
Right. Yeah, and there's obviously, if you're dealing with issues that are causing problems in your life, finding help is hard, because there's a lot of scam artists, there's a lot of people
hmm
who say they're shaman and all that. Like, I actually was, again, it's just a recent podcast where this author was telling us about all the different traditions, and like the Day of the Dead, and like
hmm
attaching to those traditions from your family, and the problem is there's too many people that are like, "Oh, this sounds cool. I'm going to become a shaman," and it's
right,
like, but you're not doing the work. You're not spending time in the culture. You're not
right.
visiting the people who actually pass this down generation after generation,
hmm
and you can't trust it. And it can lead people down the wrong path, and you could get into some spiritual issues,
hmm
and it does more worse
yeah.
than it helps, right?
For sure. Yeah, it's kinda like anybody and their mom can get something off of Groupon, call themselves a priest, and, it's kinda like you have to be careful for that
Yeah.
kind of thing. And that's sad too, because there's a lot of people who are really needing help, and so sometimes they seek out, spiritual types or what have you, and they just get swindled all of their money
Hmm.
too. So it's just, you kinda still have to use your logic with it, and it's hard to use logic with being spiritual sometimes.
Yeah. And back to what you were talking about with like prophetic dreams and animals, I've had that too. Really only one dream with an animal that came right away. Like I'd never dreamt about a tiger before, like ever in my life, and then I had this dream about a tiger. And it wasn't anything specific, but I just remember seeing a tiger. And then I turn on the TV, and that's the first thing I see is just tigers.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just also the kind of the deja vu thing, right? Where you are in a place you've never been before, and then you're like, I dreamt about this like 3 years ago,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
That
And
that
that's
happened
that's
to me too. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and it makes you wonder why.
hmm Some people say like that it's like a way of telling you that you're on the right path, or that you're
Right.
on, and
Mhm.
it's hard. It's hard. That's a big thing, because it's like, is fate real? How much does fate influence your
Mhm.
life, kind of thing? Because am of the opinion that we are here on our own. I mean, we're not on our own, but what I mean is we have our own decisions. We're free to do whatever we want, and other people can do things as well. And so if they affect your life negatively or positively or whatever, I'm not sure that that's fate. But I do think fate does play a role here and there, but maybe not as much as we think.
Yeah,
I
I've
don't know.
kinda thought about that myself, because especially when it comes to, past lives and things of that nature, it's kinda like, how much control do we have? Um, and it just really, you can really go down rabbit holes trying to figure things out, because if it's not all pre-planned, then is there such thing as fate, or is it a higher self of sorts guiding you? Then you start getting into things like Akashic records. I don't know if you're,
Hmm.
yeah, familiar with that. Yeah, and stuff like that. And like where we basically choosing our path before we came to this side, just to
The
learn
soul
different things.
contract.
Exactly, exactly. So it really gets into, you can really just go off, and at the end of the day, it's kind of like we have to have enough wisdom to know that we can't prove or know. A lot of people can feel. A lot of people will say, I'm certain. I'm definitely not certain,
Right.
at all, about what we're all here for and what the point is. But I do
Yeah.
think that you should just try and be, it goes back to your dream, as good of a person as you can be, without getting taken advantage of as well.
Yeah, and and that's the thing I think people learn as they get older, maybe, and some people just don't, but just that the most important things in life aren't things, right? The most
Right.
important thing in life is connections and growing and helping other people,
Hmm.
you know, raise them up, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
a lot of people just don't get there because they're so self-involved and, trying to improve themselves, which is a good thing, obviously.
Right.
But like there's if you're just alone and trying to improve yourself all the time, that's kind of, for some people it might be missing the point, but maybe that's their social contract for this lifetime, right?
Right, and that's
Like,
the thing too. It's like our society doesn't really, at least here, does not really, it's all ego based. So everything is like, what do you do for a living? What car do you drive? Oh gosh, look at this new celebrity and look at what they did and pay attention to this celebrity's life, not your own. It's just so backwards and it's just really not helpful. It's not healthy. Hollywood, don't even get me started, like it's just so but at the same time, as humans, I think we do have a nature about us that we like to exalt certain things. We
mm-hmm,
like by nature, you can always put children in a group and you can see immediately who the leader is, who has the strong personality and who will follow that. And that's just human nature. We've always been that way. And so I think that in some level, it also distracts us from being depressed as well. I mean, everything plays a purpose. I just think you have to do things within reason. Um, maybe you do like a celebrity. That's fine. Don't make it your life kind of thing. I think everything in just medium, don't
mm-hmm.
go too far this way or that other way with anything that you do. Because you can see
it
how
is
bad that it can affect you.
it is funny that you bring up celebrities, and obviously we were talking about dreams. I've had so many dreams lately about celebrities for whatever reason. It's such a weird thing.
Do you
Like,
research
not,
them? Do you look them up when you get that weird?
maybe I should. I mean, I haven't. I keep a dream journal, so I've
There you
been,
go.
I keep track of everything and
That's
write it
dedication right
down.
there. I do not have the dedication to keep a dream journal. I think that's awesome though, especially you can look back at what was going on in your life at the time and kind of see. So that's good.
Yeah, because you never know. Like, you never know what kind of message it has, and if you, because for me, like, or most people, when you wake up, it goes away quick, right?
That's true.
So I try. I mean, obviously, the most vivid ones will stick with you, but some
Hmm.
of them, you wake up, you're like, oh man, that was weird. Okay, better write this down. Okay, I try to recall it, and I just put it in my phone. I just like, okay, what happened? Okay, this was weird. Okay, oh yeah, and then this happened, and then this happened.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I'm not sure why. Like, I've never, when I was growing up, like I think this started maybe about a year ago for some reason. And it's been like all over the place. It's like
Huh.
anybody from like Willie Nelson to Arnold Schwarzenegger to like any, it's weird, and it's all over the place for whatever reason. I
So
don't
what
know.
I'm hearing is you need to smoke more weed and work out a lot. Is
I mean, maybe. Well, what's funny? I mean, yeah, sure, absolutely. What's funny about the Willie Nelson dream is I, we were, so he came up to me in a van, like, okay, seems normal. And he pulls up, and there was a transaction. I sold him my eyes, and he, and he gave me somebody else's eyes, and we did the transaction there and surgery or whatever. And then he cracks open a beer and hands it to me, and he's like, yeah, just drink this and you'll be all right. And then I walk away, and then I wake up. It was so random and so weird. I'm like, so why was it beer and not weed, and why am I selling my eyes, and why? It's, I mean, obviously there's meanings for things, and I didn't look that one up. It was just, I was just so dumbfounded. I was just like, what is this? Why am I dreaming about this?
well, I think that's cool. I mean, just right, off the, fly, it sounds almost like it's cool for people to see your perspective, but for you to see others as well,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
maybe. Yeah.
yeah. And you're doing that right now, right? You have a podcast and everything else. And so I think that's kind of neat. That's kind of what you do.
I think that's what I love. I think I'm also, so I obviously I do some film stuff, and writing is kind of one of my biggest strengths. And I think why it's a strength is because I can see other people's perspectives, and I take criticism well because I want those perspectives. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, you see things this way, and this
Mhm.
will help the story get better. Absolutely, I'll take that advice, right? And so I love being able to try to see things from other people's perspectives. It's hard because
Yeah.
everybody is very unique in
Oh, for
their
sure.
past and their everything, and it's fun. It's fun to be able to try to figure it out and also use that in my writing and also with the podcast, because it's like this, I've met so many cool people and learned so many new things that I would never have known if I hadn't started this. And
Oh, for
it's not
sure.
all horror stuff, you know. It's
Yeah.
like what we're talking about. It's the it's dreams, it's, you know, it's self-help stuff. It's
Mhm.
everything. It's, you know,
And
and
that's what's kind of interesting or difficult as well, is like, well, yeah, you can hear others' perspectives, but also consider the source. And at what point do you know when to kind of like turn that off, you know? Because like you can have one person with a completely opposite idea as yours. Is there a right or a wrong? Sometimes there isn't. It can get really difficult to see objectively sometimes, I feel like. Do you ever have that
mhm.
trouble, especially with your art? Because like art is art, and I feel like it's very personal.
Yeah, because again, it's like when people are giving you notes and everything too, you're just like, well, that's not this. Like they'll give you notes and they'll like try to change your story, and you're like, well, that's not really what I want to tell. Like
Yeah,
that's not where
convey.
I'm going.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is. I mean, art. Yeah, art is very very subjective, and it's very hard to tell stories. I mean, obviously there's tools that you can use. They're like, okay, this should happen at this point, and there's a structure for this type of genre that you're using, and you need to get to things earlier. And that kind of stuff I think helps me, cuz like I'm pretty all over the place with stuff, and like
Mhm.
having structure for even the podcast. Like we've talked about so many things already.
Oh, yeah, and my
Um
ADD is probably really helping that. We're just going over here and over here and
I love it, honestly. Like it's I think that's that I think when I first met you, I think that was the first thing I was like, this girl gets it. Like she absolutely understands me. And it's like I don't know. It was definitely that like ADD connection.
yeah, 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 it's never
You
a dull
know?
moment with our conversations because 'cause we'll just go over here and go back and circle back around, and so, yeah, I get it, but
Yeah.
so when you were
But
talking about the dreams and you said that sorry, what were you gonna say?
no, go ahead.
No, you said that you had, prophetic dreams as well, so has there been anything that almost, like, saved your life, or has it been more so like, "Hey, watch out for this person," or, "Hey, be careful?" Is it, like, warning stuff, or
For me, it's actually been locations for whatever reason. It's always been a space. Like I've always what's crazy is it's always been a space I've never been to before. And I would show up there for the first time and I'm like, wow, I have been here before, but no, I haven't.
Hmm.
And I remember it. I'm like, yeah, this is the dream that I had. And it's crazy because I do like most of the time remember it. Once it happens, I'm like, oh yeah, this was like 3 years ago. This was like during winter time. I remember waking up from it. Because at the time it didn't really mean anything. It was just a dream.
Mhm.
But then once I experienced it, I was like, ooh, this is kind of crazy.
Do you
So
think it could be like a past life type thing, or do you think it's just like something else?
So I love that topic. Like I have been researching it because I've been wanting to write a script about it. I actually started one basically I've learned a lot. I actually had a past life regression as well.
Oh,
Um
cool. I'd love to hear about
yeah.
that.
So, so well, it was. I think it was a reading, not a regression, but it was a past life reading, which is different because regression is you could get hypnotized and kind of go
Right.
from there. The
Mhm.
reading, it was similar, is still talking about past lives, and one of the past lives was like this was like ancient. I was like a old turtle, right? just
Okay.
just swimming, just swimming in the ocean. And
Uh-huh.
basically she told me that I ended up, by myself, just kind of swimming around, and then ended up on this beach, and then just kind of dying, but like living a long life. So it wasn't like exciting. It was just kind of that
Yeah.
was one of them. And then another one where I was like a family man. Like I had a family, I had like a some kind of day job, like a lawyer or something. And it was very much, your typical life, that, well, I don't know about typical, but you know what I mean, just like
Yeah.
traditional, what you would consider a traditional, like what people say, I guess. But yeah, and it got me thinking that, and those were the only two that came up when we did it. But I feel like when you go through these past lives, you do learn these lessons. You do have these different um states of being, right? Like when that in that one life I was a family man, and maybe in this
Mhm.
life that's not something that's for me,
Mhm.
right? Like it's kind of one of those things, like maybe in this life I'm meant to be more creative and do things that way and not have a family, or who knows. And that's the thing that I've kind of learned with the past lives things, that, or just in life in general, just, you can't stay, you got to be willing to um change, or let life kind of guide you, and not just, because like you can have plans, obviously have plans, make goals, all those things. But if things happen in life and change that, then roll with it, right?
For
And I
sure.
think that's one thing that I've learned, because like, yeah, I mean, yeah, if it changes and maybe you're meant for something else, be open to it. It could be the
For
best thing
sure.
that ever happened to you, and you would have
Yeah, and
never known that.
I think that's a good point because so many people get caught up in maybe what they were told growing up that they needed to be. And that goes back to the whole ego thing. It's like, who are you if you're not an attorney or a parent or whatever? Who are you without all of that stuff? And I think it's really good to keep that in mind because people can get so depressed, just getting caught on the whole, I should have done this, I should have been this, I should, maybe not. Just roll with
Hmm.
the punches. You might find a whole new happy life doing this. You might make a whole lot less money, but you'll be happy. And this is like your key to your happiness. You just never know. And I just really wish that people knew a lot or felt that more. So I like that
Yeah.
you said that.
Well, and also, so the past lives thing, a lot of people, I've looked up, just the different, how people know that they've had a past life. And
Hmm.
a lot of it's kids, a lot of it's like kids between the ages of like 4 to 7 years old
Yes.
is when they're, yeah, when they start talking about it. And
Hmm.
the parents are like, what are you saying? Because
Yeah.
some parents are like, this is nonsense, whatever.
Hmm.
But it's not nonsense. It's, and they've done research, and a lot of these kids, they fact check them, and they're like, oh god, this is actually really true,
Right.
all of these things. And I think that's super interesting, right? How do they know these things? How they're 6, they're 5 years old, they shouldn't know about the intricacies of like the Hollywood scope of life in the 40s.
Hmm. Yeah, for
Like
sure.
my little nephew, actually, he is 6 right now, and he tells us that he was a British soldier in World War II.
Oh my God,
And
that's so
he's
crazy because I was just thinking about this story I saw on Unsolved Mysteries about that. Okay, go on. That's nuts. I was just literally in my head thinking about this story. Okay, that's
You're gonna have
crazy.
to tell me, but right after this, tell me that. But yeah, he also said he had a brother, and yeah, it was very weird, and he knew like the French flag before he was ever taught it. Like it was just weird little things like that. But what
So,
was this
yeah.
story?
So, okay. So I don't remember the specifics of the one that was on Unsolved Mysteries because this is like old school Unsolved Mysteries when it was like in syndication when I was a kid. This is a long time ago. But see, that's another thing. I was just always so interested in this stuff since since I was young.
Oh
And
yeah.
on top of, my experiences and everything else, but I do know I was okay. So there is a Facebook page, and I think it's just called like Past Lives or Forgotten Past Lives. I can't remember the name of it, but it's parents will get on there and talk about their children saying things, and you'll see stories about a kid. Me and my boyfriend were just talking about this, where like a lot of people think that if you have a mark on your skin that you're born with, that could have been where you were killed in your past life, type thing, like a birthmark.
Yes. And you're good. My camera is just having issues.
Oh,
It's
see, now
still
we're talking
going
about
though.
weird stuff and weird stuff's happening.
Yes, the birthmark thing. Explain that.
So, it's just the theory of maybe a place where, for instance, a bullet or an arrow or a knife might have been the exit to your last life and it kind of comes back on your skin in this life kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's just a whole bunch of cool theories that people talk about. I know a big one was Edgar Casey. Are you familiar with him?
Yes. But go for it. Some people know.
So, okay, so I don't even remember much about him. I just know when I was younger, my mom used to take me to the Edgar Casey Center for something in enlightenment. And they would have like these little, I guess, fairs, and you could get like a picture of your aura taken. And they had all these different spiritual types in their own booths and stuff like that. They did past life regressions and stuff. And apparently, he was able to go to like a different dimension and kind of get knowledge, I guess, from that, and kind of bring it back. And so there's like a whole following he has. And it's
That's super
just,
cool.
yeah, it's just another example of I had the most colorful childhood. My mom was like this hippie artist from New Orleans, if that tells you anything. And so we were constantly like getting our cards read after church, because of course you go to church and then you get your tarot cards read after, right? So at least I had kind of like a mix of seeing what was out there, the different things that are out there. So I could kind of make up my own mind now that I'm older, kind of as far as my beliefs and everything. So that was cool.
Do you believe in past lives?
I think I do. I had an experience where I saw past lives, my own past lives, and it made a lot of sense because I've always been a huge history buff, and some of the periods and locations I've always been interested in, I was there. I saw myself in like the 1700s France. And from what I gathered, I was about to be married to someone who was, I guess, a soldier. I see him leaving on horseback. And when he left, someone strangled me. I don't know who it was, but I think it was a guy I had seen and he was mad that I was going to marry him. It was something like that. But I was sort of affluent. I could tell by my clothing. And I just remember seeing my blue dress and the candles that were like a candelabra type thing, like on the wall. And then it was like lights out. Then boom, I'm in another past life. So that was kind of interesting.
That's very interesting. And do you think so? A thing about past lives that I find interesting is sometimes regret you're going into another family member, right? Like an of in the future kind of thing. But sometimes it's also you're not this time you were a woman, next time you're going to be a man,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
like different races, and
For
sometimes you're
sure.
in different countries and different
Hmm.
cultures. I find that very fascinating, and like the reasons for that, right? Like
Hmm.
why, and is that your choice, right? When you're making this contract or
Hmm.
whatever it is, like is that part of it? You're like, well, I had a good time being an American. Like, let's see what it's like in New Zealand. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Or you might need to learn something different, so you're given a whole different life with not as many of our, worldly things that we have at our fingertips here, like running water, for instance, that you
right.
might need to be appreciative of. And that kind of flows, the whole karma thing, past life thing kind of flows into the karma. And a lot of times I think people like to really feel like bad things should happen to bad people, but that isn't necessarily how it happens. And I heard a theory that karma isn't what you do, it's your attitude toward it. So if you hold a lot of guilt, then it's kind of like we're radio frequencies. And if you're constantly on the frequency of fear, you're bringing things
Mhm.
into your life to be fearful of. So you're actually doing yourself the opposite. You're doing yourself a disservice because you're always anticipating this, and that's exactly what you're bringing to you.
Hmm.
And that kind of falls into like the whole shadow work thing when it comes to trying to be a better person. There was a really good book I read about this subject called Existential Kink.
Mm.
And I recommend it to people. It's out there, but it really is. I think it gets to the heart of our subconscious because Carl Jung talked a lot about this. And he basically said if you keep seeing things that you call fate, it's actually your subconscious. And until you heal that, you're going to keep repeating those same patterns and call it fate when it's really yourself. So I think sometimes we have to understand how much of a role we play in our own quote fate, karma, things of that nature. A lot of people will scream to the mountaintops, I hate being taken care of. I hate when people take care of me. And that may be how they feel consciously, but subconsciously, it's quite the opposite. You love to be taken care of. And that's a hard pill for
Hmm.
people to swallow. And that goes along the lines of pretty much anything. So I think that when it comes to like our subconscious and like the past life theory and stuff like that, it's really cool to explore to kind of get a better read on yourself, and just your viewpoints and why things happen.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too that the kids, why is it just kids that remember their past lives? Why is it not, why don't adults remember, why isn't that a thing?
Yeah, and a lot of
um
people think it's because, you know, you were closer to the other side. You just came back from there. You know, your ego isn't full like what we've been talking about. You don't have all of those facades and everything you're trying to build up. You just say things like kids and animals. They're like, I'm hungry. I'm going to go eat. Well, as adults, sometimes we're like, well, I don't want to eat right now because I have to do this and blah, 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 blah. Kids don't think like that. They very
right.
much live in the present moment. They're very much innocent, compared to us. And so I think that that probably might have something to do with it, maybe.
Yeah, well, that, and then the lack of imagination maybe, or not lack, but like suppressed maybe. Yeah, as adults, it's not or some adults, right? Some adults have wild imaginations obviously, but kids on the whole definitely are a little more open to that kind of thing,
Oh,
because
for
that's,
sure. Yeah.
and
Yeah, a
they're
lot of that
absorbing
happens.
everything.
Yeah, because it happens in school too, right? Like I just saw this meme the other day and it has like this, it's joking basically about how school systems don't help those who are creative. It's kind of like the creatives get forgotten and left behind because we're trying to like do all this STEM, which is great. Science is great, but so is creativity.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think we exalt one. And of course, artists have always had a reputation forever, in different cultures, like, oh, artists, they're the bohemians that live on the streets. They're this, they're the scoundrels. They're these people.
Right.
And so yeah, I think very culturally, and of course just making money, being creative, I think is a lot more difficult than if a kid's like, Mom, I want to be a doctor, and then you're a doctor, and it's like you always have work. There's always sick people around. So
Yeah, and it is a shame that in our society that creativity, and it's not, it doesn't pay as well, right? Like
mhm.
it's not as a big of a focus.
Mhm.
I mean, there are obviously famous people and that do make a lot of money off their art, but there's just not enough for how many artists that are out there, right?
Right, right.
So it's an important part of our society that just isn't, for whatever reason. I mean, and there's a whole conversation about that, right? Like what's right and what's wrong with our society,
Yeah,
right? It's not the things that we treasure as a society, the people in power. It's not what it should be, right? Like
right.
education, how much what kind of money goes into education? Not a lot. I mean,
Mhm.
it depends on the country, right?
For
Like the
sure.
United States is backwards. I mean, there are a lot of other countries that do things the right way when it comes to education and time off, for example,
Oh,
right? Like
yes, that's a big one.
Germany, right? They get
Yeah,
6 weeks off every year. Like
yeah,
everybody
I've
gets that.
heard that. Yeah.
So
So yeah,
yeah.
that work-life balance so people don't go crazy and get burnt out. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to have a lot better workers if they can use the creative part of their brain and they can get away from work. I was actually just speaking with someone. I work at a law firm, and I was just speaking with someone the other day, and she was like, "Well, I never really, want to get away from work. I always check my email every single day when I'm on vacation." And I'm like, "Then you're not really on vacation. You're not really disconnecting your brain." And I think that's so important. And you see that a lot, especially in America, where people just want to work, work, work all the time. You know,
I will say there has, at least I don't know, it seems, and I've heard of this, that since COVID there's been a big shift
I think there has.
with, yeah, with people diving more into the paranormal and self-help and all of the things they've dedicated more time to it and
Mhm.
to the things that are important, like art and
Mhm.
spirituality and all of that. And I think that's a really good thing.
Oh, for
um
sure. Yeah, I think there was a big catalyst there at COVID. It was a switch and it was palpable. And there was a lot of endings, there was a lot of death, there was a lot of divorce. And from that, it's just like the phoenix rising from the ashes, to not sound too cheesy, but it's true. Like you have these endings. We've seen them all throughout history. And then from that, you have new thought processes. And I think, especially when you go through things like that, you lose so much. People generally tend to go towards spirituality to make sense of it, or maybe just kind of turn a new leaf that they haven't explored before with that subject.
and I think for me, horror in general has been kind of my growing up, especially, kind of a way to connect to spirituality, creativity, all of the things, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, it's not just horror, but but that was one thing, and that's part of the reason why I started the podcast, because I was like, I want to talk about horror and my um, why I'm so open to all of these things, because
Mhm.
that's where it started. But
Right.
also, yeah, I mean, all of the spiritual stuff, all of the past life stuff, all of the tarot cards, all of the things, like it's very interesting to me. And it's these things that have been around for a really long time that people are tapping into again and again. And like, why, what works, what doesn't work, like what is the reason for things, like why do some things work for some people and not for others,
Mhm.
right? I don't know. Is there anything that you gravitate to specifically in regards to like the spirituality, like tarot?
So I mean, I just started getting more into tarot than I ever had been in the past. It was never something that really stood out to me. I actually met one of my friends who lives in New Orleans. He's very much into tarot. I mean, he could write books and novels. He is just so knowledgeable on the subject. And you know how you keep a dream dictionary, he keeps like a basically his reading book. And they
Nice.
pretty much always come to fruition. With me, I feel like I don't know how, but I somehow pick the cards that I want to pick. So I feel like I have to have somebody else do it for me. And this is upside down. This is not knowing what I'm picking. It's just my hand goes to the one. And so the thing that's just always been consistent for me has been the dreams. That's
Mm,
the one thing it almost feels like I don't have control on over because I'm not supposed to. Going back to horror, a lot of people don't understand horror. As a kid, I loved it. I always gravitated toward it. I think I always just gravitated toward dark, what would most people consider dark things, ghosts, the sleep paralysis stuff, all that. And a lot of it is because I experienced it personally. And,
mm,
when all the other kids were wanting to do something, I'm like, oh, let's do light as a feather, stiff as a board. Let's do Bloody Mary. Like, it's always that
hmm.
kid. And of course,
Paranormal games.
yeah. And of course, when I was growing up, this is back, I guess, late 80s, it was USA Up All Night. And they had horror movies, like B horror movies from the 80s and stuff. And I loved it. I loved it. I ate it up. And then Joe Bob Briggs Theater came out. He did something similar. He hosted that show with a bunch of horror stuff on it. And
Hmm.
I just remember just loving it. And I think horror can be very cathartic because it explores fear, and a lot of people are so afraid of it that they don't touch on it, but bad things, violence, all of that stuff, we all have the capability
Oh
to
yeah.
be violent people, and a lot of people don't like talking about that. And I think it's a lot more healthy to acknowledge and talk about it and our, intrusive thoughts and things like that than to pretend everything's just got a pretty little bow on it, and we don't think that way. We don't want to ram our car into the asshole that just cut us off. Yeah, we do. We choose not to. Most people choose not to, you
you,
know.
you, and I actually had a conversation with a woman, one of my friends from college, just the other day, and it was kind of out of nowhere. She's like, "I know you do like a horror podcast, but she's like, I don't get why don't you, like, there's so much pain and suffering in the world already. Like, why would you watch horror movie on top of that?" I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, that's not the like that's not the perspective. That's not
Right.
like and it was so hard to explain that, to somebody. It's like, well, because they're all about positivity, and it's like, why don't you just go into more positivity and spiritualism and all that? And I'm like, I do all of that as well on top of the horror stuff. And it's kind of hard for, I think, some people to understand, because they think of the blood and the gore and the suffering and all of that, and it's like, why would you do that to
Well,
yourself?
and I think what we're seeing a lot of that came out recently is the toxic positivity, they're calling it now, because it's not normal to just be positive all the time. It's actually probably more unhealthy to try and be positive all the time and ignore truths than it is to acknowledge the dark things, our shadow selves. Because I don't think you can fully be spiritual until you acknowledge that we do have that shadow part of ourself, and to truly understand yourself and be friends with yourself. And I feel like when people say that, I think they might have just touched on it, like put their toe into spirituality, and they think that's what it's supposed to be about. But it's not. I mean, when you look at just life in general, and just even how we're born, it's brutal.
Hmm.
It's so there's a lot of, truths and honesty that people I think are still afraid of, or they have been taught that it's bad. And who wants to be bad? We want to be popular. We want to be this. And it's like, but that's not authentic.
Right. And then that's the thing. That's what I was trying to tell her as well, is that the most genuine people that I've run into lately are like horror fans. Like
100%.
people, right? Isn't that
Hmm.
like, and I mean, I know from just my family, because that's kind of how it started, was with our family. And then I kind of went on to meet all these other people, and I'm like, yeah, these people are really chill, and they kind of get it. Whereas
Hmm.
some people just don't. And I think that's speaks to what you're saying.
For sure. I've noticed it with metalheads too. Like a lot of people are like, why do you want to listen to that music? Every single metalhead I have ever met who's like truly in it, it's got the long hair, whatever. They are the most like polite, nicest people, like for real.
Right, right.
And I know a lot of people don't think that at first, especially if they look scary, like they're big and they have this scraggly long hair and they have this shirt that looks like Satan's on it or whatever. And they're like super
Right.
polite and nobody knows what to make of that. And of course, for me, I find that interesting. Other people are like, oof, I'm going to lock my doors kind of thing, mentally as well.
Yeah, I and that's that kind of that makes me feel good, because it's hard. It's hard to explain to people, and I mean, obviously, you don't have to explain to them, but it's, for me, it's more like helping people understand.
Hmm.
They don't have to fully understand it, but at least acknowledge that it's not. I'm not watching horror movies because I worship Satan. I'm not
Right.
watching. I'm not watching horror movies because I like to see people suffer. Right?
Right.
Like, exactly. So,
Exactly. Which I'm sure there are some people out there like that, but
oh yeah.
you know, that's not the general consensus from people I've spoken with about the subject at all. It's quite the
Right.
opposite.
And also from a filmmaker's point of view, like, the lighting is gorgeous in this film. Like, we talked about special effects, makeup, the
Right.
costumes. Like, there's just so much beauty in horror and filmmaking that, like, you can appreciate that kind of stuff
Right. When
along
you have
with everything else.
Yeah, when you have the artistic eye and you know what you're looking for and you're just like, "Man, that angle was actually a really smart angle to do in that scene. That was pretty brilliant." You're sitting there thinking about that
Hmm.
kind of thing too. So it breaks it down a little bit more. And I would say the same is true for anything that is dark, quote, dark, even comedy, dark comedy.
Hmm.
Not everybody understands dark comedy. And it's
Right.
been proven time and again, even by psychologists, that for a lot of people, especially people who've been through extreme trauma, um, that is definitely a coping mechanism, a very healthy coping mechanism, actually. And, you look at any comment section online, and that is very much lost on people. So,
Yeah, and that was the thing I was trying to explain, is like, yeah, sometimes horror movies are kind of therapy for some people,
mhm.
and they're like, well, why don't you just get therapy?
It's
I'm like,
cheaper.
yeah, oh yeah, it's way cheaper, and yeah, and it's entertaining, and maybe, and if even if it sucks, it's like, there's still a couple things in there that you might like,
Yeah.
you know.
So
Like, I
then
just
what?
watched, I just
No,
watched
I was.
Velocipaster. terrible movie, B
It sounds
movie.
like it.
Yeah, but it was entertaining. But yeah,
Yeah.
what were you
So
gonna say?
what is your favorite horror movie of all time?
So it would like probably a vampire movie, like Lost Boys would be up there for sure.
Great movie.
Yeah, obviously. Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. That
Okay.
one would be up there. Um, gosh, there's so many. Um, like The Thing would be up there. John Carpenter stuff, like he's just
Yeah.
amazing. There's it's hard to say just because there's so many different types of horror, right?
Yes.
And I love ghost ones too. Anything like The Exorcism of Emily Rose
Oh
is a
yeah.
very underrated,
It
movie. I
was.
love it.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
What
Yeah,
about you?
that's well, as far as like scary movies, I love the 80s slasher flicks.
Yeah.
And I love, just Halloween is such a good movie. I know a lot of people say that, but I love that movie. I love Freddy. I mean, the fact that you can't even get away from him because when you're sleeping, that's when and then you're trying not to sleep. It's just nuts. Old
Mhm.
school young Johnny Depp, and it was
Oh
just,
yeah.
everything was just classic and great. Um, and then I really have always liked psychological thrillers as well. I don't like gore so much anymore.
Is there anything that you are working on? Is there anything you would like to plug? Is there anybody you would like to shout out before we wrap things up?
Nope, I just want maybe people to start being more creative and have fun and don't use fear as an excuse to not be creative. I think that's what I can end with because I think it broadens your mind and lets you meet interesting people from all walks of life and can't live in fear.
I love that. I 100% agree with that, and that's the hope, right? Like
Right.
don't let money and where you're at in your life determine what you do with your creativity,
For
because
sure.
the world's missing out if you don't do those things, if you don't
Absolutely.
take a chance.
Yeah.
So
And who knows who you might meet just putting yourself out there. So I think you should always just have that passion.
yeah, that's what we're here for, right? To be
Hmm.
creative, meet some cool people, collaborate, and see what happens.